I am David Sanford, Chairman of Sanford Heisler Sharp McKnight, a national civil rights law firm. And I am delighted to be here today with Carolin Guentert, who is the co-chair of our criminal sexual violence practice and victims' rights practice. And it is a pleasure to be here with you.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here with you.
So you and I haven't had much of a chance in the years we've been together to really drill down in your life and in your practice and in your passions. I know a lot about you, but I'm going to learn more today, I'm sure.
Okay.
Just starting out, tell us a little bit about your early life, where you were born, where you grew up, what your formative influences were in your early childhood going through college. What was that like?
I grew up in Germany. I was born and raised in Germany for the first 10 years of my life. And when I was about 10 years old, my dad, who was a chemist, my mom's a chemist as well, he had the opportunity to work in the U.S. for a couple of years. And I remember very well that they sat my sister and me down to ask us, tell us that we're moving to the U.S. And apparently my response was, if we can take Molly, who was my rabbit, then I'm going. And my parents were so relieved that I said yes, as long as the rabbit was coming, that they said yes. And that turned out to be a major headache because it's actually not easy to transfer a rabbit over the Atlantic Ocean.
They didn't realize how hard that would be.
It was actually incredibly difficult.
But they did it.
They did it. I think they were also very worried that she wouldn't make it because they had to put her in the bottom of the plane with dogs and cats, But she made it, and then she lived until I went to college. And we got to the U.S. I started elementary school in the U.S. I didn't speak any English, really, which was challenging for a couple of months. I picked it up pretty quickly. But I, every day was taken out of class for ESL, English as a second language, where I was with other kids from other countries who were learning English all together. And that was a really formative experience, I think, navigating that time with my family. I also remember that at the end of every day in elementary school, I had this wonderful, wonderful teacher in 5th grade. It was his first year teaching. And he went out of his way to make sure that I sort of got caught up. And he would meet with me and my mom and sort of half translate and figure things out for us. And I did catch up. I would say it took me about 6 months to a year to really feel fluent, which in retrospect, having tried to learn a language as an adult is really fast. But yeah, it ended up working out. And I think in part because of this teacher who really looked out for me and this wonderful elementary school and the friends who I made who really helped me. And then it turned out that my parents were staying. My dad got a new opportunity at the same company, and we ended up staying long term, and we're still here. And I enrolled in high school in my town, and after that, also really wanted to go to college in the U.S. My life was here. But I think in part because of that background, I chose to major in international studies. I wanted to get back to, I was always really interested in travel and international affairs, and that's probably why I chose it. And I minored in French, which that's the language I tried to learn as an adult, much harder that time around, and women's and gender studies. And I think that's the part that became really relevant in my work now. I took WGS, Women's and Gender Studies courses right when I started in college. And I think that gave words to things that I had always felt, but didn't really know how to articulate in middle school or high school, things that felt, unfair to me, or the differences in which boys and girls were treated in school. I think those classes really set me on the career path that I'm on now.
Were you attracted to women and gender studies because you had a sense that there was some unfairness that you wanted to address through academic studies? Was that part of it?
Just some inherent unfairness. I think I was really aware of, experiences that my friends had, experiences that people had at work that I knew about, or that I'd myself had in school, that there is a lot of inequality in the world. And I just felt really at home in those classes and knew I wanted to do something more with that.
And so that knowledge propelled you to do what? Did you decide at that point that law school was the right path based on that experience?
Yes. but not because I desperately wanted to go to law school. I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a lawyer, which some people do. I got there through process of elimination. I knew that I wanted to keep being in school. After college, I wasn't ready to quite enter the workforce yet. And I knew that I wanted to work on issues of gender inequality, gender-motivated violence. I didn't quite know what I could do with that. And, talked to people in my life, talked to our career center at school, and there were several different options, including graduate school. But law school is what really appealed to me. I think I'm a really practical person, and that felt like a way to get really practical skills to further that interest. And that's what I did. I applied to law school.
And so how did that early interest then translate to the course selection in law school, or any clinics or any practical experience you had in law school and shortly thereafter?
It was directly relevant. I really gravitated towards classes that allowed me to think about discrimination and inequality in the world. At the time, I was still really internationally focused. And as the years have gone on, my practice has become really focused on the US and specifically New York, of course. But I took a lot of classes about international human rights of women. I took classes on gender-motivated violence. I took a class on human trafficking. And I was really involved in the Domestic Violence Advocacy Project at NYU. And I took a clinic it was actually the inaugural year of the Reproductive Rights Clinic at NYU. And so I spent a semester thinking really deeply about the state of reproductive rights in the US and working on cases. And every time I had one of those experiences, it just drove home for me that that's the work I want to be doing in the civil rights context. And it became clearer and clearer to me how many problems we had domestically in the US and how I could really do that work here in the US.
Yeah. So you came out of law school. Mm-hmm. Take me through your path before you joined us.
I started my career at a big law firm, Freshfields, and the reason I chose them is because they are a partially German firm. They have several large offices in Germany, and I thought that might be a nice connection to be able to go back home, and I was able to do that. And
that's a nice benefit.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot there. I mean, I think in those first couple of years, you really learn. I learned a lot of the skills that I just really didn't have yet. How to write a professional email, how to talk to a client, really how large meetings are run. I was staffed on a couple of really big matters, so collaborating with a lot of different offices. And I made really good friends, which was very helpful.
All important skills here, by the way.
Definitely.
Transferable skills.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I realized pretty quickly that I wanted to do civil rights work. And I was doing mostly corporate matters. And while I was learning really important skills, I was itching to get into that world. And so I applied for clerkships, thinking that might be a nice way to do the transition into public interest work. And it was. And I got incredibly lucky. I still consider this one of the great fortunes of my life. I got to work for Judge Jack Weinstein, who just was my hero, still is. He was on the bench for many years, I believe until he was 98. And that's when I worked for him towards the end of his incredible legal career. And in the year that I worked for him, I just learned so much, not just about the law and the different kinds of legal cases that there are, but his humanity. And he also took the long view of just how much can change in one's life.
I only met him one time at a conference, but struck me as a very kind person.
A deeply kind person who cared so much about other people, and I think he put that first in the law. I just found him incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
And
great experience.
Great experience. One of my absolute favorite memories of him is there came a time in the clerkship where I started talking to him about what I might do next, and that I'm really hoping to transition into public interest work, and that I was specifically interested in working on issues of gender inequality. And he said, I'm going to dictate a letter to you. And it started off with, Dear Ruth. And I said, Ruth who? And he said, Bader Ginsburg, you're going to write a letter to Ruth so that you can talk about your interest in gender inequality. And that's what I did. And she wrote me back. I still have the letter at home.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was amazing.
That's awesome.
He was just an incredible person, and I learned so much from him. And it gave me the confidence that careers are really long and winding, and you never know what will come next. But one thing will sort of lead to another, and doors will open that you don't know, you couldn't possibly imagine at the time.
So, what doors opened that brought you to us?
The next door that opened was I applied, while I was clerking, I applied to all jobs I could think of that would allow me to do two things. One, litigate, and two, work on matters of public interest, civil rights. And the job that ended up working out was a fellowship at Georgetown. For 2 years, I taught in the Georgetown Domestic Violence Clinic. I was a teaching fellow, and I supervised the caseloads of students who were representing survivors of domestic violence in family court, and also teaching classes in that clinic. I learned from two really wonderful professors who had been doing this much longer than I had, and it really sparked in me an interest in teaching. I realized how much I enjoyed interacting with the students. I loved interacting with the clients. I got a lot of experience in court, and it was such a good feeling being able to help people in the moment who really needed it. And once the fellowship ended, I did that search again. Again, I applied to jobs that would allow me to litigate and that would allow me to do civil rights work, ideally with a component on gender inequality. And I remember very well interviewing with you and talking about these experiences. And I've been at the firm ever since for almost 7 years.
Well, it's been our great honor and my great honor personally to be your partner during that period of time. I can't believe 7 years have gone by.
Almost.
That's kind of crazy. You've done a lot of different work in the firm. You've been involved in many different matters. You've worked with people on teams across the entire country in all of our offices, so many legal assistants coming and going, and lawyers who have been here for a long time, partners who have been here for well over a decade, in some cases, 2 decades. Tell us about what that experience has been like, just being a part of this firm, working with so many different people and so many different matters, before we get into some specifics.
It's been such a privilege. I've really seen it grow. I think in the nearly 7 years that I've been here, we've probably doubled in size. We've moved offices. We've started practice areas, and that has been so exciting to see. You're right. I think I've worked with most people and certainly all of our offices. I love working in teams. I think it's my favorite aspect of this job, of working with so many smart, talented, passionate people. I mean, everybody who's at our firm has similar goals that I do, which is to work on civil rights, to strengthen and uphold our country's civil rights laws, to do good in the world, and to do so through the legal process. And that takes courage and determination and grit. And I think everybody who works here has that in spades. And it's just been such a pleasure working with our colleagues.
We do have great people. And this is something that's come up in a lot of my conversations with partners. And people really appreciate being in this firm, in part, and sometimes in large part, because of the fact that people are really kind and super smart and dedicated to the same things.
Yes.
And that's rare, right? You don't get that very often anywhere in the country. Very few firms, I think, can say that. And maybe no other firm can say it quite the way we do when you have 60 lawyers around the country, all of whom are committed to the same things, within broad outlines, and are nice, kind people who are super smart.
I agree with that. And I think it's essential because litigation involves a lot of conflict. And that's not how I like to live my life. It is part of my professional life, but it isn't what I want in my personal life or in my interactions with colleagues. We are representing clients who have had terrible things happen to them, who have experienced discrimination or sexual assault, and we're guiding them through a really difficult experience. And on the other side, as is their job, there are lawyers who are defending against that. And so naturally, our cases are rooted in conflict. That conflict should not be coming from our coworkers or from within our firm. Life is hard enough. Our cases are hard enough. It's an uphill battle being a plaintiff's lawyer, and I really value working at a place where everyone is kind and where those kinds of conflicts don't arise.
100%. I completely agree with that. And the only control we really have, we can't control what judge we're before. We can't control many things, including sometimes even our clients and how they evolve over time. But we can't control each other. We can't control the environment we're in. We can, make clear what our values are and what the virtues are we're looking for when we hire them, and what the virtues are we look at when we continue their employment over time. And that's why I agree with you. It's so important to maintain that, because it's so exhausting otherwise. The work we do is tiring.
Yes.
It's exhausting. There are many opportunity costs and resource allocation in our lives that deplete us. And we have to find sustenance with each other. If we can't find sustenance with each other while we're depleted on the front lines, it's going to make our lives doubly difficult. So you've worked on many high-profile matters. You're involved in high-profile matters today. When you look at your time with us during the last 7 years, what cases resonate most with you?
I think there are a few that stand out. One of the first cases I was staffed on when I joined the firm was with you, actually. We were representing a proposed class of female attorneys who alleged that they'd experienced gender discrimination at their law firm, in that they alleged they weren't promoted with their class once they returned from parental leave. That case was really eye-opening for me. I learned so much, and it was interesting starting my career at this firm off thinking so much about the legal industry and how promotions work within the legal industry, how it's still predominantly male at the top, how difficult it can be for working parents to make it to the top, and what the structural barriers are. I found that case really exciting and learned a lot. And I think because of that, I still spend a lot of my time now representing people who experience pregnancy discrimination, discrimination on the basis of their caregiver status, or that they were discriminated against because they took maternity or paternity leave. That case really was the beginning of doing a lot of that work that I care deeply about, because there continue to be structural challenges for pregnant and parenting workers in the workplace.
Do you find that things have gotten better, stayed the same, or gotten worse in the last 7 years, so far as you can tell?
It's a good question. I see a lot of pregnancy and caregiver discrimination these days. I think the benign view is actually, even though the state of paid parental leave is abysmal in the US and it continues to be abysmal, a lot of states have been stepping up, including New York. A lot of states have been passing really comprehensive protections for paid parental leave. New York has a law that allows pregnant workers to take time off from work in order to attend appointments, including IVF, including for end of pregnancy care. That's new and really important. There's disability leave. And I think a lot of employers just aren't caught up to the laws and how many more rights employees have in this context, and make mistakes. And I think the less benign view is that, unfortunately, there are still a lot of stereotypes about pregnant and parenting workers. I think the prevailing stereotype is still, once somebody is pregnant, they're less committed to their work. And once somebody is a parent, particularly of a young child, they have other things on their mind and they're not as invested in their work. And just anecdotally, but from studies too, it couldn't be farther from the truth. We know that people who feel like they've been treated fairly by their employer, who have gotten the leave that they need, and then are able to return to a workplace that accommodates them, are excellent workers. And they're extremely loyal to their employer and are efficient in their work, because there's nothing like having a young kid to teach you how to allocate your time and how little time you really have in the day, and to be really efficient. And so I think between those two things, those stereotypes that continue to exist, and that employers aren't quite caught up to all of the new leave requirements, that a lot of this is still happening.
One of the things I'm most proud of is having a firm that has a holistic practice. And by holistic practice, we really care about all aspects of a person's experience. So it's not just dealing with their legal problems. They come to us in order to potentially resolve a legal conflict, which of course is our primary mission. But we also have another mission, and that is to consider all aspects of their lives in order to give them the best advice we can. And all aspects of their lives involve things like their medical life, their psychological life, their financial life, their reputational life, their professional life, their professional viability going forward. All of that and more becomes a part of our practice. Talk about that in connection with the special challenge of dealing with survivors of sexual assault and sexual misbehavior.
When a survivor of sexual assault calls me, one of the first things I think about when figuring out whether this is a case that I can assist with and that our firm can take on is whether they have the support that they need and whether this is the right moment in time for them to come forward. I know from representing survivors through this process that it can be difficult to be a plaintiff in a litigation. And I don't mean that in any sort of discouraging way. I think it can also be incredibly empowering. But if somebody isn't prepared for what litigation looks like, and if they don't have a support system around them, whether that be in the form of medical assistance, like a therapist or a psychiatrist if necessary, and just a supportive partner or family or friends who can really be there for them, it can be a really difficult process because the litigation system can be invasive and require somebody to talk about one of the worst experiences of their lives and to have the defense really question what happened to them and pick that apart because that's their job on the other side. And so I try to think holistically about what support the person has. Are they ready to be able to tell this story? One of the first things I also look at is the statute of limitations. While it's quite short for sexual assault, in a lot of states, some states have taken incredible steps recognizing that people sometimes need time to come forward and be able to tell their story, that they've extended the statute of limitations or created windows in which somebody who has a claim that's otherwise expired can actually revive their claim. New York City has a window that's open right now until July 2027. So that's another thing that I look at. Do we have time? Does this person have time if they're not quite ready to be able to tell their story? And another thing I consider is this a case that this person is ready to litigate out in the open? Or is this something that's better handled pre-suit in a confidential negotiation if that's what the other side is interested in? I really try to think about what's best for that person. And the other thing I always ask early on in one of our first calls is, what are your goals? How do you think I could help you? What would be the best possible outcome for you? I think that allows...
That's a great question.
I think that allows I ask that in all my intakes, how do you think I could help? What would be an ideal outcome for you? And then I talk to them about what I think is realistic and achievable based on my experience and the state of the world, because that matters too. How we're thinking about these issues as a society, and what I think I might be able to help with.
So one of the goals people have sometimes is to tell their story.
Yes.
And to be publicly vindicated. And the best way to get public vindication is to go through the litigation process, go to trial, raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth, and give testimony before a jury, have a jury assess your credibility, have a jury assess the credibility of the other side, weigh the evidence, and ultimately decide, and hopefully decide for you, and get that moment of public vindication. Yes. Sometimes that's the most important thing. Sometimes the most important thing is to get a resolution as quickly as possible.
Yes.
We have a settlement discussion leading to a pre-suit confidential settlement. In other words, nothing's public, nothing's on file. They get a certain sum of money, the client does, in exchange for which they give a release of all claims. And then there are considerations like non-disparagement, confidentiality, tax treatment, and other things associated with the settlement. What do you see the interest being in the area of practice that you have? What is there a wide range of interest going from the pre-suit confidential settlement to the trial and everything in between? What kinds of interest do the clients express to you as part of that early conversation?
Definitely, it ranges, and it completely depends on personal circumstances, how ready they feel to tell their story publicly, what family considerations they have, what medical considerations they have. There are all sorts of reasons why people may want to reach a confidential resolution or go all the way through trial. And I view it as my job to lay out those options and figure out together with a client what might work best for them. Sometimes it changes throughout that process. I've definitely had clients who initially were very scared to come forward or for various reasons wanted to have a confidential resolution. And in the process of, a mediation or really talking about what happened to them and hearing the defenses from the other side, have wanted to go public because they are upset about how the other side is defending against what happened to them. Or sometimes they just really needed to practice telling their story a few times and realizing that there are people who will receive it and will support them. And then they do want to file publicly. I think it really depends on the circumstances.
And some people want to file, but would like ideally to keep their identity
Yes.
Outside the public realm. So we file as a Jane Doe
Yes.
or a John Doe often. How does that go?
It really depends. Every state has different rules around that. I think a lot of states recognize that people who experience sexual assault, especially if they experienced it when they were a minor, should be able to proceed under a pseudonym. It really depends on the court and the state, but generally speaking, for sexual assault, and if somebody was a minor, it is possible. And that's a really important thing to be able to do. To be able to pursue a litigation, but not have to reveal your name in circumstances like that.
And sometimes you can be a Jane Doe all the way through trial. We had a case against the entity known as Girls Do Porn, and we represented 22 victims. And each testified at trial as Jane Doe 1 or Jane Doe 2 or Jane Doe 22. And that was a successful trial. We got I think it was a $22 million bench verdict. So when you counsel people, do you have that conversation about the possibility of there being a Jane Doe or a John Doe potentially through trial?
Yes, if it's something that they want. I think if it's something that they express to me that is really important to them, yes. But because I know that not all courts allow it in all circumstances and that it's sometimes a fight, I would never try to convince somebody to do that. But if it's something that somebody comes to me with saying, I don't want to be public, I'm not ready for my name to be out there, then absolutely, I think through it with them about what the possibilities might be.
Yeah. When you think about being here the last 7 years, you worked on many significant matters. What cases in particular stand out?
In addition to my employment discrimination cases, the other cases that stand out to me are holding schools and universities accountable when they are not upholding the obligations that they have to students. And we've held really powerful institutions accountable. And, students, when they come to campus, have certain rights, and colleges and universities have obligations to them. And when that breaks down, we've really been able to represent students when they need it, particularly in sexual harassment or sexual assault cases, when students need a strong advocate at their side. And those cases have been incredibly rewarding because everybody should be able to get an education free from sexual harassment or gender discrimination, sexual assault. And if that happens, they're entitled to a fair investigation and a just outcome.
What does holding powerful institutions accountable mean in practice?
I think about that concept a lot because, of course, if there's physical abuse or harassment, usually it's coming from one person or from several people. But I think it's really important to think about the larger context. Harassment, discrimination, abuse, sexual assault, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a context in which, an institution is explicitly permitting it or looking the other way or has indications that it's happening but not following up on them. And in order to prevent that kind of conduct from happening again in the future, I think it's really important to hold the institution accountable, whether that's an employer and their HR department, or if that's a school or university, the military, and other institutions that are really responsible for keeping people safe and shouldn't be looking the other way when they have indications that discrimination or harassment or abuse is happening within their institution.
What are some practical steps you would advise people to take if they're sexually assaulted or suffer harassment in the workplace or at any other institution?
If they're harmed, I think if they're physically harmed or experiencing mental distress, I think first and foremost, try to talk to your doctor, your therapist, your family, your friends, anybody who can be a support system. I tell all my clients that that is the most important part, much more important than their legal case. And once they have that in place, if a crime occurred, if there was sexual assault, for example, they may want to consider reporting it, whether that's to police or HR or whoever's appropriate in those circumstances. Generally speaking, it's a really good idea to write things down, especially right after they happen. That may not be intuitive when something really terrible happens, but it can be a really good idea, especially if something traumatic happens. Sometimes it's difficult to remember it later. And try to talk to an attorney as early as possible. A good lawyer will be able to tell you if it's time to bring a claim or to wait, what the statute of limitations is, what kind of evidence would be useful, if there's a claim to be had, and how to pursue justice. And try to pick a lawyer you trust, who talks to you like a human being, who shows empathy and care in your communications. That really matters, because these legal relationships also tend to go on a long time because these cases go on a long time.
You have to absolutely relate to your lawyer.
Yes.
And feel some kind of connection that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we've talked about, it's not just about the legal relationship. It's about much more. And you want whoever you're dealing with to appreciate you as a person and not just as a client with a legal problem.
Yes.
Because if you want to get a lawyer who looks at you as a client with a legal problem, there are many, many lawyers out there who do good work.
Yes.
But if you want someone who can appreciate that legal complexity that you bring, as well as appreciate the complexity of life as it is in so many spheres, and can help you navigate through that, you're going to be so much better off in the end.
I agree. And especially in the kinds of work that I do, I'm really cognizant of the fact that people are trusting me with very intimate information. People are telling me about terrible things that happened to them, recounting their assault to me or the discrimination that they experienced, how that made them feel. If the case is in litigation, I'm going through their medical records and their performance reviews and asking them really intimate questions. And so it's really important that anyone who's working with me trusts me and that I've earned their trust and that they feel like they can be open with me and have that kind of relationship.
Well, Carolin, it's been my pleasure to spend this time with you. It's been my honor to be your partner for 7 years, and I look forward to many, many more years to come.
Me too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.